Hello everyone, it's Richard Lewis here with another video, and today I've got a humdinger for you. It is a piece of esports insanity, the likes of which I've never seen before, and it's interesting because it's kind of the convergence of the two worlds I currently choose to spend most of my time in. Now, what I mean by that is, I obviously do a lot of reporting still on esports. I work in esports. I like to contribute to the esports community, not just through content, but through consultation, giving advice, bringing up important issues that the industry faces, and a little bit of reporting still now and then. But also as well, increasingly, I've been doing a podcast where I talk a lot about kind of politics and media breakdown. And sometimes me and Sam will just talk about things that are going on in our life, you know, just funny little tangents. And we try and blend it all together in a 2-hour podcast, which we hope everybody who listens to it enjoys. What I've increasingly found is, though, is that people who follow, not everyone follows the esports content anymore. It used to be people followed the esports content and they watched the political stuff because they like me as a personality, or they just avoided it altogether. Now, increasingly, what I'm finding is I've got an audience, actually, that don't give a fuck about esports at all, but they want to tune in for the Richard Lewis show. So this is a story that's very interesting to me because this can exist in both worlds, and I'm sure both worlds will find it interesting, and maybe it'll bring these two groups kind of closer together again. Now, I want to say I've done videos kind of like this before. One was a very tongue-in-cheek title called Social Justice Warriors Come Closer to Esports or something. It's in the channel. And it got me attacked by these lunatics that exist on Twitter and everything. And I just want to talk about what I mean by that. So Social Justice Warrior, I don't think really encapsulates people's politics, right? Like, it's a term that I use for a specific subset of people, very much of a liberal bent, but kind of like liberals gone wrong. You know, I consider myself to be a classic liberal, in the sense that I believe in, personal freedoms, personal choice, and I've got a very liberal outlook on a lot of issues. A lot of people seem to think I'm right wing. I wouldn't be accepted by the right wing at all, actually. I'm for legalization of drugs. I'm very opposed to the direction the Trump administration's going in, trying to bring back the war on drugs, which has been a resounding failure. And I don't see why a government body should get to tell me what substances I can and can't put in my own. I'm an adult. I know the risks. I think it's absurd that we've got people in jail for low-level marijuana charges. I'm pro-choice, so that would immediately discount me, I think, from a lot of Republican get-togethers. And there's all sorts of things. I believe in free healthcare, to a certain extent. I certainly think having a system where everybody gets the best healthcare for free all of the time, regardless of circumstances, will place too much of a burden on the state. But equally as well, I think the American healthcare system, having been in it and having engaged in it recently and not been very well, and looked at some of the numbers that are going out there, even with an incredibly generous and full comprehensive healthcare plan I get through my job, I kind of think there's room for improvement. I don't know if Trump care is that. It probably isn't, honestly, but I don't think Obamacare was it either. So I try and judge the issues, and I don't have any viewpoints on people's identities. I don't have any issues with women at all. I can't even fathom why people still care if you're gay or not, or bisexual. I don't have any issue with transgendered people either, and that's a massive sticking block for some people as well in modern society. I just don't give a fuck. I just want people to be able to define themselves as they want and be happy and get through life. So I think a lot of people have some misconceptions about me, and I want to get that out up front because we're going to be briefly touching upon the issue of transgenderism in this video. And that's because I woke up on the 5th of May and there was a report on Buzzfeed. Now, I think my view on Buzzfeed has been quite well known if you follow the political podcast. I think Buzzfeed, they're trying to reinvent themselves as a serious and credible news outlet, but they've completely fucked that up. For me, they need to go back to doing what they should just do, which is throw away popcorn content lists. I don't have any issues with that, but, you know, just not attempting journalism in the traditional sense, the investigative reporting or whatever, because after the Trump dossier, you know, we published this dossier, which was outed as WikiLeaks as not being a dossier. It didn't even meet the standards or requirements of a dossier, saying Donald Trump paid prostitutes to piss into a bed where Obama once slept. It was nonsense. It's never been substantiated. Most people find it absolutely laughable. It was doing the rounds for months, and serious news agencies rejected it. I think once you publish something like that, you really got to stay away from the news. But that doesn't mean BuzzFeed are entirely bad or all their staff are evil. You know, I don't get hysterical about it. I just wish they would stick to what they're good at and leave the reporting to actual journalists, because I'm very dubious about some of the qualifications of these people. Now, this story absolutely proves that. It verifies it. So I woke up, as I said, on the 5th of May, and I have to use an archive of this, as you'll find out why. But it was talking about esports, you know, and mainstream media outlets have kind of rubbed up against us before. And here it is. These trans women were asked to show their passports to enter a female gaming tournament. No males are allowed. Please take care. Fake your gender can be penalised. That's the sub, and that's by Lane Sainty. And look at this. A group of transgender women were barred from taking part in a female online gaming tournament after being told by an organiser they could be penalised for faking their genders. I was like, oh, dearie me. This sounds like a right old pickle ESL have got themselves into. Let's have a look. And you can see here it's Sly Buell Regilio, a transgender gamer who lives in Sicily, Italy, told BuzzFeed News via email that a recent gender transition has been tough, as she is an avid gamer. I've been gaming since I was around 10. Gaming has always helped me cope with the burden of not being able to express my true feelings fully. And as you probably heard, we're not very welcome in this community, at least among the average player. But when I met a group of other transgender girls, things started to look up from there. Regilio and her fellow gamers play Counter-Strike Global Offensive, a first-person shooter game, and we're excited to enter an online female tournament starting on April 30th, hosted by the Electronic Sports League, ESL, and organised by the Munich Finest Gaming Company in Germany. The tournament, called Counter-Strike Global Offensive 5-on-5 Female Open Summer 2017, was established after requests from female gamers aimed to foster talent among women in esports. But after Regilio sent in her team's entry on April 28th, she received an email rejecting the request, stating no males were allowed. Please take care. Faking your gender can be penalised. And here's the email. I'm just going to say right off the bat, that's a very unfortunate phraseology, but I'll say this from ESL's perspective. The admins that are dealing with the sign-ups aren't employees, or sometimes the volunteers, or the very low-level employees. And saying, please take care, faking your gender can be penalised, is a very clumsy phraseology. So certainly they should have worded that a bit more sensitively. I think I can agree with that. Anyway, Regilio goes on to say, when I saw this email, I almost broke down in tears. Here I am thinking we finally have a shot to shine and show our true colours to the gaming world, and then we get shut down based on our looks because we didn't look female enough for them. Now, again, this is fairly absurd. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it becomes clear why. But if we take this quote at face value, it wasn't about that at all. It was about the fact that it said male on the passports. They weren't able to provide passports that confirmed them as female. And you can see as well that when they tried to re-enter, they received messages saying this tournament is for females only. Right? So let's be clear about what happened. This is being reported on BuzzFeed as if these people were barred, that transgenders were barred from entering. Well, no, it's that they didn't meet with the requirements to enter, which is that they needed a piece of photo identification, preferably a passport, that showed that you were a female. Okay, so people got up in arms about this. I mean, really up in arms about this. And let's just talk about why that's ridiculous before we even get into the little twist in the tale. So first off, BuzzFeed saying that they were barred because they were trans. That's disgraceful. I mean, that's an absurd way to interpret what happened. I'm sure we can all agree that when you have a female-only tournament, it's imperative that we don't let people game the system to get in and compete in the interests of competitive integrity. If we have female tournaments, and we do in esports because we say that there's a barrier to entry that they're not ready to compete with men yet because they don't have the level of opportunities or the access that male competitors do, then it's very important that we allow women to compete in the tournament without men sneaking in as a troll, right? Like, we can all agree with that. Now, the requirement of a passport, I have no idea why this isn't mentioned in the Buzzfeed report. I'm going to tell you exactly why that is the case. So, in the ESL system, they have a license system, okay? And what this means is that you are licensed to play in their tournaments. To obtain that license, everybody who enters a prize money tournament in ESL across the board, from the people entering $50 nightly cups right up to the professional level, are required to give a passport photograph, a passport with a photograph on it, in order to be able to claim their prize money. That is the requirement for everybody to have the license to compete in ESL. Now, interestingly enough, you can see this on the website. So Buzzfeed didn't even look this up. You can find this yourself. Basically, if you go to the ESL1.com/rulebook, there's a rule there that clearly states how the licensing section works. I'll just show it you again. People probably don't want to see the full thing, but it is downloadable as a PDF. Let's just see if it comes up anyway. It probably not going to, is it? No. Okay, well, it's just me. It's up there. And basically explains how the license works. Now, why does the license operate this way, you might say? Okay, well, yeah, I suppose that's a valid question, even though it's the same for everybody, and therefore it can't be discriminatory in any way. Understand that key point, right? When nobody's being discriminated against. Discrimination is when you treat one group of people differently to another group of people. What's happened here is we're trying to treat a group of people the same, and people are saying, well, it's not the same for them because it's hard for transgender people to get identification with their gender on it. You know, you need doctors. And yeah, the situation, it probably is pernickety. But then again, I know many trans people. And I haven't met one that's had that particular problem, honestly. I'm sure there are out there. I'm not disputing that. But I've not met one. I've met plenty of people who are transgendered who have the ID that aligns with the gender they now define as. So maybe it's not that big a deal to have that as a standard, but people are coming out and kind of beating the drum and saying it's ridiculous. But the other thing is, right, why did ESL have that licensing system? Well, it turns out that in Germany, and we were told this a long time ago when ESL was founded, I'm sure it's still the case, but in Germany, if you want to get prize money and compete in tournaments of this nature, you actually have to hand over an identification. And why is that? You have to hand over the identification because, let's say, for example, somebody cheats because money's involved and the league want to ban them. Well, if they can't see who they are, if they don't know who they are, then they can just re-enter under a new identity. So there's that. There's a legal requirement to protect the integrity of your prize tournaments, but there's also a legal requirement to be able to say, you know, we banned this person and this is the reason why, in case they get subject to legal action because of the ban. So this is a protection issue for the business that offers the service for the people competing. So it's the request for photo ID has got nothing to do with bias. It's got nothing to do with trying to keep trans people out of gaming. And in fact, just on that point, I reject the idea that esports and gaming is, how should we put it, like biased towards people or unwelcoming of people who are different. And let's say transgendered people are different. Not my words, not how I think about it, but let's just say they are. Well, you know, how many times have I seen transgender people compete at the highest level in this? And there's absolutely no, you know, the overwhelming message is one of support. For example, You know, everyone, I'm sure she's very tired of being brought up as the example, but, you know, you look at Scarlet over in StarCraft 2, if aliens were to come down tomorrow and were to just, for some reason, look up StarCraft and find out who the most popular players were, she'd be one of them. They'd go back to their home planet believing she was the greatest player of all time, probably, because of the reams and reams and reams of positivity and positive press and write-ups and interviews and support that she's received while transitioning in the public eye, I might add, which, of course, isn't easy for anybody to do. So I do reject that. I've talked about this a lot. I mean, shit, we've got fucking furries just out and open in esports. These are people who like to dress up as furry animals and fuck each other, which honestly, outside of the online community, some people might find that weird. But we don't. We're very accepting across the board of people's foibles and everything else. So the idea that trans people get a particularly bad time in esports, sure, there's going to be trolls, and sure, there's going to be people who are mean and mean-spirited and say awful things, but that's the internet. That's the internet for everybody. That's how we all experience it. You know, I'm a straight white male imbued with privilege, apparently. Well, guess what? I get told to fucking kill myself every day I sit down in this chair. You know, so it doesn't feel privileged from that perspective. I think many people would attest to the same thing. So obviously, this looks like it's, you know, a big deal on the surface of it. People are really trying to drive this idea that ESL discriminated against trans people, which they absolutely didn't. They just held them up to the same standard as everybody else. Kotaku, Nathan Grayson, he went out and without conducting any of his own investigations, he wrote it up and repeated the facts, because that's what Kotaku do. So Buzzfeed just blindly reported the facts, interpreted them to fit their narrative. Kotaku took the Buzzfeed report and interpreted them to further their narrative about esports, transgender people being discriminated against in esports, which is nonsense. Now, I was pretty bummed out about it, and I spoke to a lot of ESL employees at the time, and they were all bummed out about it, because they were like, well, what are we supposed to do? We've got this requirement to have photo ID for all of our competitors across the board, and we're being singled out here. And even their own partner, AnyKey, right, came out and did the same shit. I mean, AnyKey came out and really criticized ESL. Now, to give you a little bit of background on what AnyKey is, AnyKey are an organization that was part founded by ESL and Intel to protect marginalized groups within esports and ensure they're not being discriminated against. It's also got a lot of focus on cyberbullying and that kind of thing. And, you know, it's well-intentioned, but I didn't particularly like the way they handled this. They immediately sided with Buzzfeed and the reports, and they effectively attacked their partner, ESL, and assumed the worst. I'll show you one of the tweets. I mean, obviously, I kept a hold of these because this is, you know, important stuff in my opinion. So here we go. AnyKey, again, someone's everyday identity should matter. Does this person identify as a woman normally or just for the tournament? That was what they were saying was the standard that need to be required. But then they said, but so what if a cis guy troll is dedicated enough to claim they're transgender? We'd rather include him than make it harder for trans women. Well, you might feel that way, AnyKey, but for ESL, it's a far more complicated issue. It invalidates their entire tournament if a troll slips through and a team with a troll. I mean, assuming again that we deem men to have some advantage in all of this, it would be really unfair for all the women that competed. And it's AnyKey's job to champion women, But this is what I mean about why I don't want identity politics coming into it, because we get into this oppression Olympics bullshit, and all of a sudden it's like, well, any key are of the mindset that if we have to fuck over the women in a tournament, we'd rather do that to protect trans people. Well, that's not very fair for the women, is it? And any key are pledged to support women in esports. So all of a sudden you can see how ridiculous this gets. And it becomes a very complicated situation to negotiate with any kind of sensible outlook. Indeed, just to show you, there was some women that really, female competitors in Counter-Strike that got upset by this announcement that we want to do away with the requirement for having a passport or some form of identification. You can see here, this is Vilga CS, who plays in Team Secret, which is, got some of the biggest names in female Counter-Strike in it. And you can see here, one of the reasons why there's no female players in the top male scene is the way how women and men think, react, and take decisions in game. Now, again, I don't necessarily agree with this, but I will say that there's been several scientific studies that sort of validate that men and women do think differently and perform better in certain tasks. That's science. Maybe I don't think we've looked enough into esports to make any broad considerations and broad determinations about it. But calling yourself a woman, however you were born, different gender, is not bad and shouldn't be judged, sorry. But I can call it as cheating to let trans participate in female-only tournaments because they are still men and have different hormones and the way of thinking, which will give them a physical advantage towards natural-born women. Now, I certainly don't necessarily agree with what she's saying. I think once you cross that threshold into identifying as a woman, we need to look at the specifics and kind of on a case-to-case basis. That's the only way it's going to really work. For example, we've seen it in UFC, well, MMA, transgendered fighters that were once men, now women. Is it okay that they can get in a ring having the benefits of years of testosterone and increased muscle mass, which is just the reality of being a dimorphic species? Is it fair that they can get into a ring and then beat women who haven't had those advantages? And I got to be honest, I think in that particular instance, no. But I don't think it makes me a fucking transphobe. Not by any long chalk. But I just think we got to apply a little bit of common sense here, and maybe there's some. Maybe we wait. Maybe that person goes on. Maybe we wait, and or maybe that person just has to not be allowed. Or maybe we need a different division. Or maybe women need to consent to get in the ring, and each fight has to be on that basis. I don't know what the solutions are, but I do know what the problems are, because to me they're very apparent. Now, again, with what Vilga was saying, I don't really think I agree with it, but that's certainly, she's a good representation of how I believe many pro-women felt about the prospect of trolls coming into that space. And it's any key's job to protect their interests and their wishes, and it's certainly the job of ESL to make sure that the women who compete in their female-only tournaments are protected from trolls and troublemakers and mischief makers. But of course, nobody was having any of that. Let me just bring somebody else up here. And this is a guy who is, as far as I can tell, not very well. Let me just find, it's going to be pretty tough to find it, actually. Okay, let me just see. Let's go through. Holy moly. Sorry, they're an anti-Trump person, so as a result, they tweet hundreds of times every day into the void. So there's this guy called Kevin Dent, and I'm going to do a whole video on him because he's a charlatan, a faker, a liar, and a fraud. And I found this out as a result of researching him after these comments.
But this is a guy who poses as having influence in esports now. He's in one of these kind of fake consultants, like fake. Give me money, give me. But he's got no credibility in the scene. He's never done anything in the space, and he started tweeting about it, and actually was trying to drive that ESL got in trouble and had sponsors pulled out. This is how fucked up this guy is. He says, "I'm wondering if ESL is speaking for Valve." And this was a report in PvP Live where they said, there has to be a standard. And he tagged at Xbox and at Intel. Now, I don't know why Xbox are there at all. And because he's a not very bright person, yet he pretends he graduated from Harvard, he ends all of his tweets with emojis for some reason. But he then went on to claim that he was in talks with major sponsors in Portland, and he was going to make them pull out because of this disgusting standpoint ESL had taken. Now, ESL have made many, many mistakes and done many things wrong over the course of their career. You can't really be an industry leader and that not be your fate. But this is gibberish. The idea that they should lose sponsors for this. The idea that there's a group of angry rabble-rousers going to Valve and Xbox for some reason, or anybody else, and saying, hey, you shouldn't support ESL and all the fine work they do, which includes these female tournaments. By the way, I mean, that's great, isn't it? Because ESL had, this little minor lapse as far as you're concerned, you would take away their sponsors for all female tournaments, fucking over the female scene. That's how progressives think, unfortunately. They don't see further than the end of their nose. But this is, again, ridiculous. You've got Kotaku beating the drum, Buzzfeed beating the drum, these fake esports consultants beating the drum, even PvP Live, who were endemic, beating the drum. Death to ESL for how dare they make a demand of a competitor that all competitors must adhere to. So, you probably can guess the twist anyway. I'm sure some of you heard about it. But this was the thing. The twist was this. As published by... And this is what's fucking really bizarre. InfoWars come to esports. Mark this day in your calendar, friends, because the 9th of May 2017 is where InfoWars reported on esports. Yes, that happened. Here it is. InfoWars exclusive. BuzzFeed tricked into publishing fake news story. And what it turned out here was that the trans gamers were actually a hoax. It was a hoax. And what they did is they baited BuzzFeed into it. So I'll just read you some of the quotes from here, because I know a lot of you will be loath to click on InfoWars links. Again, when I linked this story out, people were going, you're linking to InfoWars. It's an exclusive. What do you want me to do? Ignore it? Probably, because you're a fucking moron. Anyway, a group of online comedians, keep that in the back of your mind, who plotted to fool BuzzFeed into posting a completely fake news story, was successful after the social news and entertainment company published hoax claims that the group had been denied entry to an all-female video game tournament because they were transgender. Over the past 2 weeks, we set up a plot to see if we could trick BuzzFeed into posting something that is fake. For the laughs, Sly Buell Rigilio told InfoWars. And it worked. BuzzFeed fell right into the trap. And then they talk about how they saw the tournament, and they took photos of themselves wearing wigs and everything else, and they said, we knew we were going to get declined because we didn't have the ID and everything else. So they bombarded Lane Sainty, the journalist at BuzzFeed, with a We're Victims approach, and they jumped at the chance to write articles about it. And you can see there's the original headline. These trans women were asked to show their passports to enter a female gaming tournament, which, again, is perfectly reasonable because everybody is asked to show their passports to enter an ESL gaming tournament. And then again, it just repeated the hoax claim without checking anything. But here's the issue. If they'd looked into the name, all right, they would have found that this group was called the Rigatoni family, or the Rigatonal family. And they're a troll group. And they're like conservatives, that kind of like troll groups and everything else. But they didn't even look into the names of the people involved. And you can see here, we did nothing to hide the team name. And if you were to search that name in Google, you'd find our channel and website, and we clearly are shit disturbers. I think that's meant to be shit stirrers. It's blatant negligence on behalf of Buzzfeed and other news orgs that have since picked up the story, aka fake news. And you can see they've got a goofy website and some other stuff. And there's Kotaku weighing in. And yeah, it was a hoax. It was a complete hoax. Now, at that point, what I expected to happen, right, was everybody who got it wrong was just going to hold their hands up and be like, all right, that was really fucking stupid. We jumped the gun. It's completely our fault. And actually, you can see that the checks and balances ESL have in place work. And so far as we know, no genuine transgendered people have been affected. And we stopped trolls entering and disrupting a female tournament, thus protecting women in ESL. Go ESL, right? Big pat on the back. Absolutely not. That Kevin Dent fucking lunatic doubled down immediately and said that just because it was a hoax, it made no fucking difference whatsoever, which it couldn't make more of a difference. It's fucking fake. It's a hoax. And then when I started watching these publications update their reporting, it was fucking crazy. It was like I'd gone into a fucking, I don't know, like a wormhole where just lunatics existed. So let me just find this PvP Live report. So as I said, PvP Live reported on it. Sure, of course they did. And interestingly enough, you know, Kevin Dent had a relationship there with PvP Live, which he didn't disclose. But you can see here, I'm going to bring up the PvP Live updated story. And you might be in for a little shock here when you see it, because I would have thought it would have been, you know, oh, it was a hoax, and we're PvP Live, and we're kind of endemic to esports. But it was written by a chap called Gregory Ibanez, and it was a very, I mean, heavily weighted article anyway. And you can see they even added the statement from any key here, which was hilarious. Regardless of what it says on your passport or ID or what judgments people want to make about who they think you are at any key, we believe in a policy of you are who you say you are. Well, fortunately, when it comes to the legality of paying out prize money, it's not that simple. And this means that anyone who self-identifies and lives as a woman should be able to participate in any woman-only tournament. And they can, but they need the ID to do so for legal reasons. And then look, to the surprise of many, not really, it turns out that Regilio and his team were acting in bad faith. Specifically, they're a bunch of right-leaning YouTuber trolls operating under the alias the Rigatoni family, per their interview with infamously far-right publication InfoWars. They deliberately targeted ESL to provoke controversy and trick publications into writing about, well, fake news. This is where it goes a little bit too far for me. An editor should have picked this out. Their actions are, of course, reprehensible and beyond the pale, given the history of discrimination and harm specific to the trans community. Well, this prank doesn't commit further harm. If anything, they've done them a favour, because now, apparently, ESL are still going to take a look at the rules for entry. So they've actually done trans people a solid. By accident, sure, but... And that's the point he makes. He says, but there is a rather clear silver lining. Their actions undertaken by ESL with any keys consultation still leads to a more welcoming environment for trans gamers. Regilio's attempts to perpetuate harm against them may ultimately just make the lies easier. They weren't trying to harm trans people. In fact, they didn't mention trans people at all. They didn't say, oh, we did this because we think trans people are mentally ill. They said we did this because we think Buzzfeed is a bullshit publication that will just publish any old shit. And it had nothing to do with trans groups at all. So that's garbage. I mean, you know, he's on fucking notice now, you know, because I can't trust anything that guy says. If you're going to inject your own politics into an apology, which is what it should be. Dear readers, we have published false facts. We're a publication. We got it wrong. We're sorry. That's what you're supposed to say. not give these determinations about, oh, well, we published falsehoods, but, you know, let's just look at the bigger picture. No, you're a publication. Let's look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is you have an obligation to publish the truth for your fucking readers, and if you get it wrong, you apologize and you promise that you'll redouble your efforts in future. But no, not with PvP Live, and certainly not either with Kotaku. You know, Buzzfeed kind of did the same thing. You know, they updated the story and they were like, yeah, well, you got us. You know, and that's fine. Actually, just before we move on, let me just find this, because I thought this was a bit fucking much. Now, again, I like the reporting of lots of people, but it's very rare I have to unfollow people that in the esports scene on Twitter, but some people have become really insufferable as we live in, you know, Trump's America. And I just want to see if I can find this tweet by another PvP reporter. I mean, you know, you think, okay, maybe Gregory Ibanez is wrong. Sure, okay, judge him as an individual, but it does speak ill of the publication in a broader context when other writers come in and adopt the same stance. Like, is anyone embarrassed that you published, you know, falsehoods? Is anyone embarrassed that you got tricked? And it wasn't even your report. You just lifted it whole cloth from another website and you just published it without any facts, you know, kind of any other fact checking of your own. So again, this is just another person screeching into the void. So apologies for the delay. I'll certainly take fair criticism for this delaying the video, because I should have had this tweet to hand, but it just came into my mind. Let me see. Okay, anti-Trump, anti-Trump, anti-Trump. Okay, right, let me just find, there we go. So hundreds of tweets, of course. Okay. And again, so it's like, what should these reporters be doing? Apologizing. I mean, that's it, right? That's all you do. But at PvPlive.net, apparently they don't have to apologize when they publish falsehoods. They attack you. So look, Regilio got us fine, but A, you're an asshole for targeting the trans community. They didn't do that. There's no evidence to suggest they targeted trans people at all. And then ESL's policy update's a good thing, so whatever, just whatever. You see, I'm in there with a bunch, you know, we updated this story and I say, yeah, with a bunch of embarrassing and needless editorializing. So that was, you know, PvP Live, right? I mean, what a publication. Now, Nathan Grayson at Kotaku did the exact same thing as well. And completely doubled down, right? And tried to make out that, yeah, we published a hoax as if it was real, but that should in no way reflect on us. In fact, these people are bad, the people who tricked us. And it says, look, Nathan Grayson, he did a big long spiel about it, and he said, beyond that, this hoax says nothing incisive or whatever about trans folk, because, well, the people who did this weren't trans. They weren't trying to say anything incisive about trans folks. They were trying to say something incisive about BuzzFeed, and they were right. It's tangentially linked to esports at best. The esports tournament was the conduit that they used. And then someone weighs in here saying, hey, stop assuming you speak for me or any other trans person. You are not the judge, jury, and executioner because you're an ally. And this person here basically kind of reads Nathan Grayson, the Riot Act, and saying, you know, let's just grasp that you don't speak for trans people just because you believe that your politics are, you know, so pure that you can do it. And you can see, again, this is kind of where we get into the realm of apology from the Kotaku writer. So sorry for giving that impression. I said in the correction, I'll say it again, I made a mistake that stands to affect trans people in a negative way. That's shitty of me, and I'm extremely sorry. I promise to do better in the future. For now, that's all I can do. What I was saying above was more based on the inferences that the people who initially reported the hoax were drawing the idea that because somebody composes trans and fool people, all those crazy liberals should drop this gender stuff. Bad faith tactics meant to prove some kind of point by enacting a completely different scenario than they're suggesting really pissed me off. And so that's what I was talking about in my admittedly heat of the moment and not incredibly well thought out stream of consciousness. So again, I apologize. Well, look, I'm not saying we should drop this gender stuff. We haven't. But what you're asking What you're really asking is that we have to drop rules across the board. Rules that are there for legal reasons. Rules that are there for everyone. Once you start saying that we need to make exceptions, this is where it gets problematic. And I got to say, I tweeted at NEK as well, and they said, you know, in that quote, we believe you are who you say you are. And I said, okay, well, what about gender fluid people? Because, you know, we saw in, I believe it was Harvard, they teach that gender can change daily. It can change many times over the course of a day. That was the pamphlet they put out. So if I'm gender fluid and I enter the tournament and I'm a woman, and then now I'm a man while I'm playing it, and now I'm a woman again, and now I'm a man, and I can... We've got to get some fucking determinations here to protect the people these tournaments are for, which are for female Counter-Strike players. And I'm not going to get into the debate about whether or not women should be competing. They're welcome in the men's tournaments, but they have their own as well. But if men start jumping across in the men's tournament, the whole exercise of having single-gendered tournaments for women is completely bankrupt. It's completely redundant. So why should the women who are competing in those tournaments have to suffer to make some broader point? That's why I don't want identity politics anywhere near esports, because unfortunately it can't just stay in its lane and be sensible. It used to be in the 70s when the term was first coined, that, you know, identity politics sort of brought people of the same group together through a shared commonality, a shared common identity, right? Well, now all it does is divide people, because there's no way women should have to feel weird about trans people competing in their tournaments. And there's certainly, but now we've got this whole thing where it's like, well, we actually want to lower the barrier of entry so men can come in and troll, and that's going to put them on high edge and high alert, isn't it? I mean, that's not going to make them feel like they're competing in a comfortable space that's fair for them. So this was handled incredibly poorly across the board, and what really upsets me, I guess, about all of this is that nobody's willing to back down and apologize, and ESL is still getting it rammed up them for doing something that they've got to do. So this was a very fucking bizarre situation. It kind of showed everything that we've been saying for a while, that, you know, esports will end up getting things like this happening to it. I mean, there'll be some real examples of similar stuff probably. People crowing victimhood when they're just being asked to do what everyone else has to do. The reporting on esports, utter garbage again, and it's from the usual suspects. That's Kotaku, who in 2011 said, why would anyone want to watch somebody play games who are better than me? Why would I want to do that? They don't get it, and yet now they've seen the numbers, they want in. And we should be very dubious about these people. And unfortunately, you know, I don't think we've got a good handle on this situation at all. Like, let's just stick to the fucking rule, all right? You need a photo ID to get your prize money to enter the tournament. If you're having problems and you are legitimately trans, talk about it with ESL. Go through any key if you feel you have to. But let's assess things on a case-to-case basis, crossing the bridges when we come to it. Not just making huge hysterical determinations that ESL are evil for just simply trying to enforce a rule that applies to everybody. Anyway, thanks a lot. This one was interesting. I'll see how people react to it, and I'll catch you on the next video.